Elias Hale lived far from everyone, on a quiet piece of land that stretched across the dry plains and gentle hills of the Southwest. His ranch sat at the edge of an old dirt road that most travelers never used unless they were lost or desperate for a shortcut. People in town knew him as the quiet rancher who kept to himself. He spoke politely when he went for supplies, but no one ever heard him talk more than needed. After losing his parents early in life, Elias had learned something heavy. Silence can become a companion when no one else stays. Most nights, he ate simple meals, sat by the fire, and listened to the wind pass through the open fields. His horses kept him busy in the day, and his animals gave him reasons to wake up before the sun. He had no visitors, no close family left, and no one who stayed long enough to truly know him. He accepted this life, believing it was easier to live without expecting anything from anyone. But that winter night was different. A cold wave had moved in from the mountains unexpectedly. Temperature dropped faster than anyone predicted, and the sky grew heavy with gray clouds. By the time the sun set, fine snowflakes were already drifting across the ground. Elias wasn't worried for himself. He had been through storms before, but he knew the animals needed checking. Storms in this region often came with sudden winds that knocked fences down or spooked the horses. So he put on his thick jacket, grabbed a lantern, and stepped into the growing storm. The wind stung his face, but he continued to the barn like he always did. As he approached, he noticed something unusual, a faint rustling sound coming from behind one of the haystacks. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was softer, uneven, like someone trying not to be heard. He lifted his lantern and moved. Closer, 4 faces looked up at him. They were too young to be alone in weather like this. The oldest seemed around 16 or 17. The youngest looked no older than 7. Their clothes were wet, their hair was stuck to their cheeks, and their hands were shaking from the cold. They huddled so tightly together that they almost looked like one small group of shivering shadows in the dim light. For a moment, Elias froze in surprise. Strangers never came here, especially not in the middle of a snowstorm. The oldest girl tried to stand. She placed herself a little in front of the others, as if shielding them. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Please, we're not here to cause trouble. Our truck broke down on the reservation road. We tried to walk to find help. We saw lights. We thought maybe someone lived here." Elias lowered the lantern so the light wasn't harsh on their eyes. His voice stayed calm and steady, the way he always spoke to frightened calves or lost dogs. "It's all right. You did the right thing coming out of the cold." Another girl, probably 12 or 13, clutched her younger sister's hand tightly. The littlest one had tears on her cheeks, not from crying but from the wind's bite. Her small shoulders shook every few seconds. "Come inside," Elias said. "The house is warmer." They looked uncertain. Years of caution showed in their eyes. They were Apache sisters, and Elias understood that trust didn't come easily when the world often treated native families with suspicion or disrespect. "You can stay until the storm passes," he added gently. The oldest finally nodded. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias helped them walk through the snow, holding the lantern high to light the way. When they reached the house, he opened the door and let them step inside first. Warmth from the fireplace filled the small living room, and the girls' eyes softened with relief. They stood quietly, unsure if they should remove their shoes or sit. Elias noticed their hesitation and simply pointed to the fireplace. "Warm yourselves first," he said. "I'll get blankets." He brought 4 wool blankets from the hallway closet, ones he rarely used since he lived alone. The girls wrapped themselves tightly, their faces relaxing as the heat from the fire began to chase away the cold. Then Elias went to the kitchen and heated some soup. He wasn't used to cooking for others, but he made enough for everyone, adding extra vegetables and potatoes to stretch the pot. When he handed the bowls to them, the girls murmured soft thank yous before eating slowly, as if their bodies were finally starting to trust they were safe. When they finished, Elias asked softly, "What are your names?" The oldest answered first. "I'm Mira, this is Tessa Nola, and the little one is Ashka." Ashka gave a tired but sweet nod before leaning against her sister's shoulder. Elias realized she must have been exhausted from the long walk through the storm. "What happened to your truck?" he asked. Tessa spoke this time. "It just stopped working. We tried starting it again and again. Then the cold got worse. We didn't know how far your house was, but we saw the light from your window." "You walked a long way," Elias said. "In weather like this, that wasn't easy." Mara looked down at her hands. "We didn't want to freeze out there. We thought maybe someone kind would help." "You found the right place," Elias replied. He meant it. He didn't know many people, but kindness was something his parents had taught him long before they passed. His father used to say, "If someone reaches your door in trouble, you don't turn them away." The land is hard enough without people making it harder. The storm outside grew louder, beating against the roof. Wind whistled through the cracks of the window frames. Elias knew no one could leave tonight, not even if they wanted to. The roads would be impossible to travel, and the cold could become dangerous. "You'll stay here tonight," he said firmly. "It's not safe out there." The sisters exchanged looks of relief mixed with caution. It was clear they still didn't fully understand the quiet man who opened his home to them. But they could see he wasn't angry or impatient, spoke gently, moved calmly, and kept a respectful distance. Elias brought extra pillows and laid blankets on the living room floor. "You can sleep here. The fire will keep this room warm." He expected them to fall asleep quickly, but instead they sat together, talking softly in their native language. Their voices were low, but Elias could hear the mixture of fear and gratitude in their tone. He pretended not to notice, giving them space to feel whatever they needed, before he went to his own room. He checked the windows one last time and added another log to the fire. "If you need anything," he said, "I'm right down the hall." The girls nodded. He walked to his room, closed the door gently, and sat on his bed. He wasn't used to sharing his home. The silence he had lived with for so many years had suddenly been replaced with soft whispers, footsteps, and the quiet breathing of 4 strangers. But instead of discomfort, he felt something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Someone needed him tonight, and he had been able to help. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time in years, the lonely ranch didn't feel lonely at all. When Elias finally fell asleep that night, he expected the storm to wake him several times. The wind kept pushing against the windows, and small rattles moved across the wooden walls like distant footsteps. But exhaustion from a long day made his eyes heavy, and soon he drifted into a deep sleep. Hours passed quietly in his room, the fire in the living room slowly lowering to soft embers. Sometime past midnight, Elias woke because something felt different. The air in the room felt warmer than usual, and the faint sound of breathing wasn't only his own. He opened his eyes, confused for a moment, and looked around. The dim light coming through the slightly open door showed 4 small shapes on the floor next to his bed. The blankets that had been laid in the living room were now spread across the wooden floor of his bedroom. He blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. But no, he could clearly see Mara, Tessa, Nola, little Ashka curled up close together, like 4 tiny bundles of fabric and soft breathing. It took him a second to understand what had happened. They had moved in their sleep. Or maybe not in their sleep, maybe they came intentionally. Elias sat up slowly so he wouldn't startle them. His movements were gentle, calm. He didn't want them to think they had done something wrong. As he reached for the lantern beside his bed, he kept his voice soft. "Girls?" he whispered. Mara stirred first, rubbing her eyes. When she realized Elias was awake, embarrassment washed across her face. She pushed herself up a little, keeping her blanket close around her. I'm sorry," she said quietly. The little one was afraid. She couldn't sleep because the wind was too loud. "We didn't want to bother you, but—" The fire was dying, and she kept shaking. Ashka, the youngest, lifted her head sleepily and looked at Elias. Her eyes were tired but honest, still full of fear from the storm outside. She didn't speak, but her small hands clung to Nola's sleeve. Elias nodded gently. There was no anger in his face, no frustration, only understanding. "It's all right," he said. "You're safe here. You can stay." The relief that crossed their faces told him just how tense they had been. They were used to protecting one another. They were used to handling things alone. Elias remembered being young and scared during storms too. His mother used to sit at the foot of his bed until he fell asleep. After she passed, the storms became heavier, not because the weather changed, but because silence replaced comfort. He understood the feeling of needing human closeness more than he ever admitted to anyone. The wind sounds worse than it is, said softly. "But I get why you moved. This room stays warmer." Tessa nodded, still gripping her blanket. "The fire went out in the living room," she said. "We tried to put more wood, but it was dark, and Ashka kept crying." Elias swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood slowly. "Let me fix that." He stepped out to the living room, added fresh logs to the fire, and waited until the flames rose again. Then he returned to the bedroom. The sisters had stayed quiet, unsure of whether they should return to the living room or stay where they were. "You can stay here tonight," Elias said. "There's plenty of space." The girls didn't move right away, as if they were still trying to figure out if he really meant it. When he laid an extra blanket on the floor, smoothing it out to make it more comfortable for them, the last bit of worry on their faces softened. They lay back down, adjusting their blankets. Ashka shuffled a little closer to the bed, her small hand touching the side of Elias's boot. She didn't seem to notice, but Elias did. He didn't move away. That little gesture carried trust given by a child who had been cold, scared and unsure just hours earlier. Elias turned off the lantern and settled back onto his bed. The room grew quiet again. But this time, it wasn't an empty quiet. It was a warm one. A shared one, as he listened to their soft breathing. Elias realized how long it had been since another human being had fallen asleep near him. He had lived in silence so long that he forgot how comforting the presence of others could be. It wasn't intrusive. It wasn't strange. It simply felt human. Hours passed, and morning light soon crept through the curtains. The storm outside had calmed but left behind a thick layer of white snow covering the open fields. Elias woke first, stretching quietly so he wouldn't disturb the four girls sleeping soundly on the floor. He stepped over them carefully and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. He cracked eggs, sliced bread, and warmed milk on the stove. The smell slowly filled the house, and before long, Nola woke up. Rubbing her eyes and lifting her head, she saw Elias cooking and blinked in surprise. "You're making food for us." "For all of us," Elias replied with a small smile. "Breakfast tastes better when it's shared." One by one, the sisters woke. Ashka stood up slowly, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She walked to Elias and tugged lightly on his sleeve. "Is the storm gone?" she asked. "It's calmer now," Elias answered. "But the roads are frozen. We'll have to wait a bit before we can travel." Ashka nodded, relieved the storm wasn't roaring anymore. She walked to the window and gazed at the snowy fields. Tessa joined her, pointing at the horses moving slowly in their corral, steam rising from their warm bodies. Elias placed plates on the table, inviting them to sit. They ate quietly at first, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. In their culture, sharing food in someone's home was a moment of gratitude, not to be taken lightly. After breakfast, Elias went outside to check the fences and water troughs. The girls followed him, curious about the ranch. Their steps crunched on the snow, leaving small trails behind them. Mira helped him scatter hay for the horses. Tessa brushed the snow off the chicken coop. Nola carried buckets of water, and Ashka stayed close, watching everything with wide eyes. "You run all of this alone?" Mira asked. "Most days," Elias replied. "The land takes work, but it gives back too. You never get tired of being by yourself?" she asked gently, not trying to be rude, just honest. Elias paused before answering. He looked at the horses, the hills, the sky. "I'm used to it," he said. "But last night reminded me that quiet isn't the same as company." The girls shared a look that said they understood more than their age suggested. As the day passed, they stayed mostly inside, warming their clothes and helping Elias with small chores. They talked more freely than before. They told him about their school, their parents, their friends, and how they were trying hard to support their family while their father recovered from his injury. Elias listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just let them speak. Their voices brought life into the house, filling spaces that had been empty for years. When the afternoon came, the storm clouds returned, darker than before. Snow began to fall again, soft at first, then heavier. Elias knew they wouldn't be going anywhere that day either. The girls didn't complain. They seemed relieved in a quiet way, almost happy to stay a little longer in a place that felt safe. That night, Elias prepared the living room again, but when he opened his bedroom door later, he found the four sisters already curled on the floor beside his bed just like before. Mara looked up at him with a shy smile. "We came here again because it's warm and because she pointed at Eshka, didn't want to sleep far." Elias nodded gently. "It's all right. Stay where you're comfortable." As he lay down, he realized something important. For the first time in many years, he wasn't the lonely rancher people talked about, not tonight and not anymore. The storm did not stop the next morning. Instead, it grew heavier. Snow fell in thick sheets and covered the land like a white blanket that kept stretching wider and deeper. When Elias stepped outside to check the sky, he knew the sisters would not be able to travel home yet. The roads would be too dangerous. Help would not reach them until the weather settled. Inside the house, the four Apache sisters slowly woke up. Their small shapes lay curled on the floor beside his bed, wrapped in blankets like gentle bundles of warmth. Elias stepped quietly so he wouldn't startle them, but Ashka opened her eyes first. She looked around, saw Elias standing near the dresser, and gave him a sleepy smile. It was the kind of smile a child gives only when they feel safe. Elias returned the smile with a soft nod. "Good morning," he said. One by one, the others woke up. Mara stretched her arms. Tessa brushed her hair with her fingers. Nola looked toward the window, surprised to see even more snow outside. "It's still snowing?" Mara asked. "Worse than yesterday," Elias replied. "You'll have to stay a little longer." He expected worry on their faces, but instead he saw calm. Maybe they were getting used to the warm space around the ranch. Maybe they trusted him more now. Maybe the storm felt less frightening because they weren't facing it alone. Elias made breakfast again. This time the girls offered to help. They sorted the eggs, washed the vegetables, and toasted the bread. The kitchen buzzed with quiet conversation and the soft clatter of dishes. Elias was not used to this kind of morning, but he liked the sound. It felt like a family kitchen, something he had not experienced since childhood. When breakfast was done, they all sat around the table. Snow fell outside the window like feathers, but inside, the heat from the stove kept everyone warm. Ashka leaned against Elias's arm after finishing her food. She didn't do it on purpose. She simply relaxed in the closest safe space. Elias didn't move away. She was a child who needed warmth, and he didn't want to take that comfort from her after eating. Elias pulled on his coat and went outside to tend to the animals. The girls followed him, curious and eager to help. He didn't stop them. Having extra hands made the work easier. The first task was checking the horses. Thick snow had piled against the barn doors, and Elias had to push hard to open them. The horses whinnied softly when he stepped in, recognizing his presence. They were hungry, shifting their hooves to find warmth beneath the cold floor. Mara helped scatter hay. She handled it with ease, like someone who had done chores many times before. Her movements were careful, but steady. "You work like you've been doing this a long time," Elias said. "We take care of animals at home too," Mira replied. "Our father taught us." Tessa brushed snow off the horses' backs, moving slowly so they wouldn't get startled. She had a gentle touch that even the most nervous horse seemed to trust. Nola brought buckets of fresh water from the pump, struggling a bit with the weight but refusing to give up. Elias admired her determination. Ashka followed him closely sometimes, holding his coat sleeve, sometimes staring up at him like she wanted to understand how he stayed calm in every situation. When the chores were done, they all went back inside to warm themselves. Elias made hot tea for the older three and warm milk for Ashka. The girls sat near the fire, warming their hands. Tessa spoke first. "Do you ever get bored living here alone?" Elias thought about it. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but the land keeps me busy. And the animals don't let me forget I have work to do." "Still," Nola said softly, "it must feel quiet." "It does," he said. "But quiet can be peaceful too." The girls nodded. They understood quiet. They came from wide-open lands where silence was a natural part of life. But they also understood the difference between peaceful silence and the loneliness that came from having no one around. Mara looked at Elias for a moment before speaking. "You don't seem lonely," she said, not meaning it as a question, but as an observation. Elias didn't hide the truth. "I think I got used to being alone, but having you all here, It reminds me of how different a home sounds when people are in it. Mara's eyes softened. She understood the weight in his voice, an adult weight. One she had seen in her parents' eyes after long days. The afternoon passed slowly, but not in a boring way. The girls told stories about their family, shared memories of their grandmother who made the best fry bread, their uncles who hunted deer in the forest, and their school days where they often helped younger kids during recess. Each sister had her own personality. Mara responsible, Tessa thoughtful, Nola energetic, Ashka full of innocence. Elias listened quietly, occasionally nodding, asking simple questions, or smiling at their stories. He wasn't talkative, but the girls didn't seem to mind. They liked that he listened. Most adults interrupted or spoke over them, but Elias waited patiently, giving them space to speak freely. When evening came, the storm grew louder again. Snow hit the windows like soft knocks. The wind hummed low. Elias checked the roof once more and added more firewood to the living room flames. He didn't want the fire to go out like the previous night. The girls helped clean the kitchen. Even Ashka tried wiping the small table, though she missed a few spots. Elias gently corrected her with a kind smile and showed her how to do it again. She giggled, proud of learning something new. The sky outside darkened early, and the ranch looked buried under white snow. Elias knew they would spend another night in the house. When it was time to sleep, he expected the girls to choose the living room, since the fire was strong. But when he walked to his room later, he found them already curled up beside his bed again. Their blankets were arranged neatly this time, like they had planned it. Mara looked up at him and spoke before he could say anything. "Ashka is afraid of the wind again," she said. "She sleeps better close to someone." Kachka nodded, holding her blanket tightly. Ilias's eyes softened. "You can stay," he said. "Keep warm. The floor here stays warmer because the walls block the wind." The girls settled with relieved expressions, comforted by his acceptance. Elias lay down on his bed, listening to the gentle breaths around him. The floor creaked slightly as the girls adjusted their positions. Ashka whispered something to Nola, who laughed softly. Mara gave Tessa an extra corner of her blanket. These small sounds, these little human sounds filled the room with warmth far beyond what the fire could give. Elias closed his eyes, realizing something important. The sisters had come into his life by accident, but their presence had changed the feeling of the house entirely. He had spent so long in silence that he forgot what it was like to have voices, footsteps, and young laughter inside his walls. He didn't feel lonely tonight, not at all. He felt responsible, trusted, and strangely peaceful. It's the kind of peace that comes when people who need help find the right person at the right moment. And as the storm rumbled outside, Elias understood that the quiet ranch he had always known was slowly becoming something new, a place where he wasn't alone anymore. Morning came slowly after the long night. The storm finally grew weak and soft, pale light entered the windows of Elias's room. The ranch looked quiet again, covered in white snow that sparkled gently under the early sun. Inside the bedroom, Elias opened his eyes and saw the 4 Apache sisters still sleeping on the floor beside his bed. They were curled up close together, their blankets wrapped around them like small cocoons. Even in sleep, they stayed connected, as if protecting each other. Elias sat up carefully, so he wouldn't wake them. For a moment, he simply watched the peaceful scene. It felt unreal how quickly they had become a part of his home. Just days earlier, he had lived in complete silence, with no sound except the wind and the animals. Now, he heard soft breathing, gentle sighs, and the occasional movement of small hands adjusting blankets. He felt something warm in his chest, something he hadn't felt in many years. He felt needed. He quietly walked out of the room and began preparing breakfast. He cracked eggs, heated tortillas he had stored, and warmed milk on the stove for Ashka. The smell filled the house, drifting into the bedroom. Soon he heard small footsteps and soft voices. Nola walked in first, followed by Tessa and Mara. Ashka came last. Holding her blanket like a cape, "Good morning," Elias said as he placed plates on the table. "Good morning," the girls replied. Smiling sleepily, they all sat around the table, eating together like a family. Ashka leaned her head on the table's edge, still a little tired. Elias gently pushed a cup of warm milk toward her. She lifted it with both hands, taking slow sips. Tessa watched Elias quietly for a moment before speaking. "Are we leaving today?" Elias knew the question was coming. He wiped his hands with a cloth and looked out the window. The snow had stopped falling and the sky was clear. The world outside was safer now. "Help should reach the reservation road soon," he said softly. "The storm is finished." The sisters exchanged looks. They knew it was time. They were grateful to be safe. But leaving also meant stepping away from the comfortable warmth they had found in his home. Mara nodded slowly. "We should go. Our mother will be worried." "She must be so scared," Nola whispered. Elias understood. Any mother would be. He finished breakfast and stepped outside to check the road. The snow was deep, but the sky was bright, and he could see faint tracks that meant a vehicle had passed earlier. It wouldn't be long before someone arrived. When he went back inside, girls were packing the blankets neatly and cleaning the living room without being told. They folded everything carefully, as if trying to show how grateful they were. Ashka struggled with her blanket, so Elias helped her, folding it gently and placing it on the couch. "You don't have to do all this," he said softly. "We want to," Tessa replied. "You helped us. This is the least we can do." Their quiet maturity touched him. These 4 young sisters carried responsibilities heavier than most children their age. Soon, a distant engine sound reached the house. Mara quickly went to the window and saw a reservation truck struggling up the snowy road. "That must be our uncle," she said with relief. They gathered their things. Simple as they were, scarves, gloves, and the coats they had dried by the fire. Ashka reached the door first. She turned back toward Elias, her small face suddenly sad. "Are we going now?" she asked softly. Elias knelt down so he was closer to her height. "Yes," he said gently. "Your family needs you." Ashka nodded, but her eyes glistened. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. The hug was small, but full of trust. Elias placed a steady hand on her back. "You kept us safe," she whispered. "Thank you." Nola came next. She gave Elias a shy smile and hugged him too, quick but sincere. Tessa followed, her expression soft with appreciation. When Mara stepped forward, she didn't hug him at first. She stood still, meeting his eyes with a quiet seriousness far beyond her age. "You didn't have to help us," she said. "But you did. You let us stay, even when you didn't know us." "That means something. You needed warmth," Elias answered simply. "Anyone would have helped." Mara shook her head gently. "Not everyone would, but you did." Only then did she step forward and hug him. It was not a small hug, not a quick one. It was a strong hug from someone who finally felt safe after days of fear and cold. The truck outside honked lightly, signaling their uncle's arrival. Elias walked them to the road, watching as their uncle jumped out in worry, checking them one by one. "They're safe," Elias said. Their uncle placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," he said. "You kept them alive." When the girls climbed into the truck, Ashka looked back and waved both hands. "We'll come again." She called out. Mara smiled at him through the open window. "We mean it," she said. "We'll visit." Elias stood in the snow as the truck drove away, its tires kicking up small clouds of white. The wind was gentle now, carrying the echoes of the girls' voices. When the truck disappeared down the road, Elias returned to his house. The silence inside greeted him again, but this time it felt different. Not empty, not lonely, just quiet for now. The blankets were still neatly folded on the couch. The cups from breakfast were still on the table. The faint memory of their laughter still floated in the air. Elias sat down on the edge of his bed, the same bed the girls had slept near for 2 nights. He ran a hand over the floor where their blankets had been and felt a strange warmth lingering there. His home had changed. Something inside him had changed. For years he had lived alone, believing loneliness was simply part of his life. But now, he realized he had only been waiting without knowing it for someone to step into his world and remind him that life could be full again. Days passed. The snow melted slowly and the sun warmed the land. Elias returned to his normal routine, feeding animals, repairing fences, caring for his horses. but every day felt slightly different. Every quiet moment held a soft expectation, a hope he wouldn't admit even to himself. Then one afternoon, just as he finished cleaning the barn, he heard a knock on the door. He wiped his hands on a cloth, walked inside, and opened the door. Standing there were the four Apache sisters. Smiling brightly. "We came back," Mara said proudly. "We brought food this time," Tessa added. "We helped cook." Nola announced. Ashka lifted a small basket above her head. "For you." Elias looked at them, at their warm smiles and familiar faces, and something inside him relaxed completely. It felt like the last missing piece of his life had finally returned. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said gently. And for the first time in a long time, the ranch no longer felt like a lonely place. It felt like a home where people came not because they were trapped by a storm, but because they wanted to be there.